Now, today we will talk about the body paragraph, how to describe a bar chart. Now, first of all, we have to learn some phrases to help us write or describe a bar chart. Some of these phrases are given here. You can learn more by referring to the books I told you about. So here we have, for example, the first one, looking in more detail. You can start your body paragraph with this phrase, or you can start with one of the most important things to notice is that, and then you start talking about the ideas. When you want to mention another idea, you can say another thing to notice. So these are helpful phrases. You can learn them, and there are more of such phrases. Uh, Now you have to talk about specific ideas. You remember in the introduction we said that you need to mention a general idea, and maybe you can refer to the discussion when we talked about that general idea. But here in the body paragraph, you have to start talking about specific ideas, and we will have examples. One example for each idea, starting with a linking phrase. Again, when you introduce a new idea, a new specific idea, you have to support this idea with an example. So for each specific idea, there should be an example. And the example, of course, you know the phrases to use to introduce examples. Either you use for example or for instance. There are certain words that you can use, certain words or phrases when you describe a bar chart or any other graph. Some of these words are given here: significantly, dramatically, and maybe in your books there is a task on page 13. If you refer to page 13, task 7 on top, you have a number of words there you can use to help you in your description. And of course, the other two small books I told you about, you can find many words like that. And here, as I told you, you have to refer to top tips or 10 tips for IELTS. These small books you have to refer to. Now, let's see how to write a body paragraph. Let's take the same bar chart that we talked about earlier, and you remember when we wrote an introduction about this bar chart. Now, I prefer to use the same bar chart so that you are familiar with it, because you are familiar with it. And when you put the introduction that we wrote earlier with the body that we are going to discuss now, and later the conclusion that we will write, you put them together, it will be a description, a full description of the same bar chart. Now here, again, let's just revise certain information that we talked about earlier. The title, here we have education, and the key on the right side we have the years, and at the bottom the horizontal axis we have the sectors of education, and on the left the vertical axis we have the number of students enrolled in millions. Now let's see on the next slide how to write a body paragraph. Here, if you look at the first phrase, this is one of the phrases that we discussed previously in the previous slides. I told you that there are certain phrases that you can use to write your description, and this is one of them. Looking in more detail. Now you are going to give details, unlike in the introduction. In the introduction, you remember we said that we need to write a general idea, but here we have to give specific ideas, details. So here, looking in more detail. So we can start with this phrase. Or you remember again, I mentioned another phrase which is one of the most important things to notice is that we can put it here in place of this one. So anyone you can use. So looking in more detail, it can be noticed that the number of students who attended tertiary education rose dramatically. See here, we are talking about a specific idea related to tertiary education. Now, please keep the bar chart next to you because here I can't show both on the screen. So keep the bar chart next to you so that you can compare the information that we mention. So here he is talking about the first specific idea related to tertiary education. And if you look at the verb rose, so this is one of the verbs that we said you can use. It is the past tense. You remember the words in task 7 in your books. Dramatically, again, this is one of the words that we can use as adverbs. Okay, so we can say here again, let's start from the beginning. Looking in more detail, it can be noticed that the number of students who attended tertiary education, see tertiary, this is specific, education rose dramatically. Now we said earlier that whenever you mention an idea, you have to support it with an example. So we expect to have an example after this to explain the idea. For example, and this is one of the phrases that we can use to introduce examples. So, for example, it increased from 30 million in 1970 to around 160 million in 2009. So that's why, you know, we said in the previous sentence, we said the number rose dramatically. Dramatically means the difference was very much. So here, again, in the example, you can see the number in 1970 was 30 million. In 2009, it became 160 million. So there is a big difference. That's why we say dramatically. The number rose dramatically. Or we can say rose significantly again. All right. And there are other phrases. As I told you, you can refer to the small books for such phrases. So here we have one specific idea followed by an example. Now we want to introduce another idea. So look at the phrase, and we mentioned this before. Another thing to notice is that this is the phrase to be used to introduce a new idea. What is this thing to notice? In the secondary sector, now we are talking about secondary sector, a specific idea, another specific idea related to another sector, which is the secondary sector. There was a dramatic rise. Again, dramatic rise. See, here we have to use different language to vary the language. In the previous sentence, which is talking about the tertiary education, we used rose dramatically, verb plus adverb. Here we can change the structure. We can use adjective plus noun, dramatic rise. Instead of saying rose dramatically, we say there was a dramatic rise. They give the same meaning, but we are using different structures, and this is actually recommended in your writing. So another thing to notice is that in the secondary sector, there was a dramatic rise in the number of students. Now here we have this new idea. We want an example. So we start the next sentence with a phrase to introduce an example. And you see here, we are using another phrase. So it is recommended to change the phrases instead of keep using, for example, all the time. You change. Once you use for example, the other time you use for instance. So here we use for instance. The number of students in the sector was 200 million in 1970, whereas you see here again there is another word to use here, whereas it rocketed to 520 million in 2009. First of all, look at the number. There is a big number. Again, we have 200 million in 1970. It became 520 million in 2009. There is a big difference. So that's why we use the word rocketed. What is the meaning of rocketed? Rocketed is taken from rocket. Rocket is a missile. You shoot it from the ground, and usually it goes up very fast in the sky. All right. So we use the verb here, rocketed, which means that it rose dramatically, significantly. Here we are using different language, you see. All right. So here in this body paragraph, we have two ideas and two examples. Now you can write these two ideas and two examples in one paragraph, or you can split them. You can write the first idea and example in one paragraph and then start another paragraph to write the other idea and example, just like here. Here we divided the two ideas and examples. Both are okay. If you use one paragraph or two paragraphs, it's up to you. But here you have to notice that at least you need to mention two ideas, because you have to reach up to 150 words in your description. You write the introduction, then the body, and the conclusion. Of course, the introduction and the conclusion will be a little bit short, so you have to write here at least two ideas. If you feel that the number will not, let's say, be up to 150 words, you can add one more idea, all right, to have three ideas and three examples, not only two.